Alrighty, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody. I don't know why I pointed at the mic. Welcome back, everybody. We are here with another episode of the Agora Podcast, and once again, we're here with the homie Andres.
What's up, guys?
He's back.
Yeah.
So today, or last time he was here, not last week, we talked more so about his coaching philosophy, how he coaches athletes differently from anybody else that I've heard talk about coaching for strength athletes, for bodybuilders, and all these things. And so we definitely had to dive into that because we thought it was super helpful and relevant for up-and-coming or current coaches. Now we're actually going to dive into the nitty-gritty and talk about training, his nutrition approaches, and just a whole array of topics not so much related to coaching this time.
Yeah.
So we're going to go ahead and start off by asking Andres, what does your current training look like right now?
For myself?
Yes.
Yeah. So right now, a couple years ago, I hurt my back, as most powerlifters have done in the recent history. I got a lower back injury. I've always sort of had kind of a weaker lower back from childhood. So, I hurt my back, and so the last few years, I'd say the last time I competed was like two and a half years ago. And I've been basically trying to bulletproof myself against, that tendency to get injured. Yeah. I don't want to say prevent injury because I can't really. My philosophy is you can't really prevent injury, but you can mitigate the risk.
Yeah.
Come
a little closer.
Oh, okay. Too far up.
Out of the shot. We need a pretty face in here, man.
No, I might edit that part out.
So anyways, what I've been doing basically is a lot of the stuff that I've done for a lot of clients that I've worked with, which is start with building the base back up. Try to introduce touches of intensity here and there so that way I don't completely fall off the wagon strength-wise. Yeah. But I like to do a lot of what I call structural bodybuilding or functional bodybuilding or whatever you want to call it, as the accessory work and even in with some of the main movements. So instead of always relying on a back squat for the squat movement, maybe I'll do more of a front rack, rear foot elevated split squat, or I'll start building single leg strength that way. And then I transition into bilateral strength movements. So recently I've been doing more back squatting, safety bar squatting and stuff like that. Hack squats I really like recently. But basically I'm just trying to build myself back up, build my base strength back up. But I haven't been doing any crazy powerlifting specific blocks yet. It's been mostly what I would call off-season general strength and conditioning type of stuff.
Are you still keeping the competition movements in your rotation, albeit with just a lower volume?
Yeah,
maybe you'll train it once a week only.
Yeah,
as opposed to multiple times if you're prepping for a meet. Yeah,
I've been keeping them in relatively infrequently in terms of the actual strict competition lift. So I'm talking about maybe I would deadlift and squat because those are the main ones that kind of trigger my back. Bench press doesn't. But squat and deadlift, I've been sort of alternating. So every other week, I hit a heavy single on back squat, and every other week I hit a heavy single on deadlift, and they alternate. So this week might be a triple at an 8 for deadlift. Next week would be a triple at an 8 for back squat. And then the week after that, back to a heavy deadlift. And then the week after that, another heavy back squat. So that's what I've been doing for a while. So it's pretty infrequent. I mean, it's every 2 weeks, basically, I'm hitting a heavy, double, triple, single, or whatever, heavy. And then for bench press, usually once a week for right now. But I'm going to transition into hitting each main lift once a week with intensity. And then the rest of the days will be just kind of lower intensity stuff, or still hitting that pattern, like I was saying, but not necessarily doing the competition lift, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is that how you would program for clients too, where if they're super far out from a meet, you'd still keep their competition lifts in there, but less frequency, focus a lot more of the accessory type movements?
So my general philosophy is that, and I think with every sport this is the case. With weightlifting, powerlifting, bodybuilding, or what have you, there's a period of time where you need to get very specific for that sport. So if that's powerlifting, you're hitting the big three every training session, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, and stuff like that. With weightlifting, same thing. They're very high frequency when they're getting ready for a competition. Yeah. And in bodybuilding, now we're talking about like, crazy cluster sets and drop sets, and that kind of time under tension and metabolic adaptations within the muscle. But I don't want for any of my athletes to stay there for too long. I only want them to stay there as long as they need to do the competition, peak for the competition, and as soon as that's done, we don't need to be there anymore. Yeah. Right? I think it's almost the same as when somebody diets down for a bodybuilding show. Yeah. We don't want them to spend 6 months at 5% body fat. Yeah, right? We want them to...
That's a great analogy, yeah.
We want them to be at 5% body fat for as little time as they need, and then as soon as they're done, let's get them back to normal.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I do with people. I like them to spend more time on general strength, because no matter what sport you're in, being generally stronger, full body-wise, is going to translate into being stronger at whatever sport you're going to try to be good at, right?
How have your bodybuilding clients responded to that kind of philosophy, since strength isn't their main goal?
So it takes a little convincing. I'll use an example of one gal that I have who has been bodybuilding now for many years. She's only ever known that life of like high reps and drop sets and supersets. And so I told her, hey, you know what? We're doing like a reverse diet right now with her, and I told her, I want you to transition more toward lifting a little heavier and more general strength training. Because I think it's going to do well for your muscle mass and your ability to build muscle later on when we do go back to like bodybuilding specific stuff. And 2, I've seen, for whatever reason, I don't have like peer-reviewed research on why, but I've seen that when you transition people to heavy resistance training and general strength building on a reverse diet or any kind of wherever their metabolism is, it tends to really ramp up their metabolism and allow them to reverse diet really well. Whatever that is, they're not necessarily burning more calories because of the training. Maybe they're even burning less compared to the high rep stuff in bodybuilding. I think it might come down to some sort of nervous system adaptation. So bodybuilding, when you get used to that, it's not necessarily a big hit to the nervous system because you're not lifting super heavy. You're doing a lot of, metabolically it's stressful. But I think that when you start hitting people with 1 to 5 reps with heavy compound lifts, the nervous system adapts really quickly and it needs to recover. And that recovery takes calories and, food. And, so that's my guess. Mm-hmm. Maybe someday somebody will prove it. I don't know. It's not proven yet, but that's what
I think what you said there makes a lot of sense because, I've been listening to people, like we were talking about earlier with Mike Israel, Brad Schoenfeld talk about how when they're structuring a training program, when you do the heavy, like triples and 5s and singles, maybe the first few months of training, you get really strong with that, but once you do that for a little while, you're going to get as good with those lifts as you can forever. Yeah. And then the rest of the training has to kind of shift its focus from that onto more of the general, like you said, the general strength training to build muscle because that's what's going to allow you to move more weight.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like I said, there's going to become a limiting factor. If all you ever do is, bench press and squat and deadlift, eventually there's going to be a limiting muscle group or a limiting factor that's going to prevent you from getting stronger. You're already as efficient as you can be because you practice that movement as much as you can, and you're used to hitting higher intensity stuff in the 1 to 5 rep range, say. So, what are your options? Yeah. You can't just keep adding volume, right, or intensity. You have to step outside of that and do something else for a little while.
That's an interesting point. I want to dive into that a little bit more, because this is something that I've been trying to figure out too with my own training, and that I've seen with other people is that you can't just keep adding volume. So in that case, what are some things that you can do?
I mean, so there's many ways to change the stimulus besides just adding more volume. Sometimes just staying with the same volume but changing the actual movement is effective. So if if you're one of those people that only ever does the big three, well, why don't you use sort of a different iteration of the big three? Like, so instead of a back squat, go for a front squat or a safety bar squat or a hack squat, or there's hundreds of choices that you have.
And I hate front squats.
Oh, me too. But like, how do you feel after you do those front squats? You're like on the floor dying basically, because it's very hard.
Accurate.
That's going to change the stimulus to the muscle. It's going to change the stimulus to the nervous system, and it's going to allow. I mean, you probably can't do as much on the front squat as you can on the back squat. And you might not even get the same volume basically on the squat movement because of that. But I guarantee you, things are going to change, right?
Do you think that, for example, taking some time off the competition list, maybe not complete time off, like you said, you'll do something heavy-ish every other week or so, but then you focus your attention onto movements that have a similar movement pattern, like you said, replace the back squat if you're a low bar squat, or do a high bar, or do a front squat. Do you think that after taking some time off the competition lifts, that you are once again primed to make new adaptations?
That's my philosophy. If you go away from the competition lifts, you're going to get a little weaker at the competition lifts. And I think a lot of people are afraid of that, right? They don't want to get weaker. That's generally not...
Especially for powerlifters. That's,
right. Yeah. That's generally not the way we want to go.
Yeah.
Our goal is to get stronger. But, as with everything in life, if you think about it, sometimes you got to take lateral steps or steps backwards in order to, actually have the ability to keep going forwards, right? If
you gain like a -1, but you get a +3 in the long run.
If you are at a wall and that wall is basically, immovable because all you keep doing is the same thing over and over again, which is try to push the wall over, but all you have to do is take a step to the side and get beyond that wall, why don't you just do that? Yeah. And so some people are, the way I see it is like missing the forest for the trees, right? Their face is right up against that wall that they can't see that there is a way around it, right? So to answer your question, I think that if you go to more of a general strength, like I always say, like there's the squat pattern, the hinge pattern, which is like a deadlift, the pressing, horizontal pulling, vertical pressing, vertical pulling, and like a weighted carry or something like that. Those are like foundational movements that we have. There's nothing wrong with, and if your squat pattern is not the back squat, it's not the end of the world, right? If you go to a trap bar deadlift rather than a straight bar deadlift, or you go to heavy dumbbell single leg RDLs or something like that, it's going to change things. It's going to change the stimulus, and like you said, that's going to allow you, once you go back to specificity, you might start a little bit lower in terms of pure strength or specific strength, but you're going to catapult past where you were before, because now your base strength is a lot bigger. Yeah.
So do you think it would be smart for people to, instead of getting attached to just the 3 movements, to more focus on movement patterns?
That's generally how I attack people's training, is by thinking about it in movement patterns.
That's a good distinction.
So, and I think the trouble is we see the super strong people of the world, like, the people that are setting the world records right now, like the Bryce Lewises, and we see like the John Hacks and the Russell Orhe and the, I'm naming all USAPL lifters right now, but, Taylor Atwood or whatever. You go down the list of everybody that's winning, and you see that they're training, at least what they're posting on social media, is nothing but specificity, right?
That really is all we see.
It's all you see. So it's either two things. A, that really is all they do, is specific work. And if that's the case, that means that they're part of the 1% of the population who can just keep getting stronger, and they don't have to do accessory work, and they don't have to do, they can just beat themselves up like that and recover from it.
Which would make sense because they're in, that top
It makes sense, right? Because if you think about it, how many people are that strong?
Yeah.
So they're generally, I don't want to take anything away from their coaches, but generally those superstars are going to be superstars, whatever way they get trained. Or two, they are doing the accessory work, but that doesn't sell on Instagram.
Yeah.
No.
Right? Nobody wants to see you doing rear foot elevated split squat on Instagram. Although I post it.
Yeah.
I post it because I'm stubborn. Nobody wants to see you doing the boring stuff like that. They want to see...
Go like his stuff. Go like his posts.
They want to see 6 plates on each side, ass to grass, right?
No, that's true. But you know what, though? I think there are some of those high-level athletes that kind of notice, and they have the same train of thought that you do. Because Bryce Lewis, I think after Worlds, he just, he had a couple posts where he was saying, hey guys, I'm now going to spend a couple blocks kind of away from, my main lifts. They're still going to be in there just to some degree. But you're focusing a lot more on the general strength, the strength training.
Right.
Like what would Westside referred to as GPP, general physical preparedness.
Yep.
Yeah, where they would focus a lot on heavy carries.
They're big on that, and even up into competition now, we get into like a whole debate on but they train more equipped people and things like that. But even going into competition, they're still using accessory work. They're still using different iterations of the big three or whatever. They're not necessarily doing straight weight deadlifts. They're doing bands and chains, or they're doing safety bar box squats and things like that, because that maybe mimics more of a squat suit for them, when they're in competition. But still, maybe they're on the more of the extreme side of the equation, where they're super into always changing the main movement and not always doing the same one. And then there's the other side, was nothing but the big three in the competition style. So, but GPP is very important. You want to have that, again, going back to general base strength, general athleticism, general fitness, even, something I've kind of tried to hammer into my athletes is building an aerobic capacity is very important in this sport.
You answered my question I was going to ask next.
Yeah, people don't really realize, because it's a strength sport, that aerobic base, actually, for anything you want to do, is very important. Not just from a recovery standpoint, but, talking about being able to recover from 90%, 95% of your 1 rep max, and a few minutes later try to hit it again, in a competition.
I've done that before, and you're just freaking gassed after that set. So if you have a higher aerobic capacity, that would definitely be advantageous.
Right. And, you're going to specify it to what the needs of the athlete are. I'm not going to tell my guys to go out and run a 5K or a 10K to try to get a better aerobic base.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do other things that are more specific towards getting stronger rather than getting them weaker.
What are some of those approaches that you do for them then?
I like to do sled drags and prowler pushes. I think are really popular nowadays. I just wrote an article. I don't know if it's out yet, but I wrote an article about different training style or different cardio styles and the pros and cons of each. I think doing something like having a daily walk, I think that's becoming really big now, is even 10 to 30 minute walk a day at a brisk pace is really good, just for building that general ability to move. And then from there, we're going into are we doing HIIT? Well, I don't necessarily like HIIT too much, especially when we're doing super intense blocks, because then that's just something else they can't recover from. It's just too much intensity.
Also probably increases the risk for injury as well.
It can, especially if we don't want them tearing a hamstring when they're 4 weeks out from a meet.
That makes a lot of sense that you brought that up. When not doing HIIT when you're kind of closer to a meet.
Same way that they try not to do that too much now with bodybuilding, is because they want as much of their energy to be conserved for working out or for lifting weights, so they can keep the muscle. But another one is Joel Jamieson sort of popularized what he calls high intensity continuous training, which is basically think about getting on a recumbent bike, putting it at a very high resistance, and just pedaling very slowly for a long period of time. Sort of similar to doing like a prowler or a sled drag for like 20 minutes straight.
Yeah.
You know, not a lot of weight necessarily,
Yeah.
but just trucking along for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Putting the bike on, high resistance, and just pedaling for 20 minutes. It's very hard.
That seems really miserable.
Especially
If you're a
the first
masochist,
time.
go do that.
Especially the first time. It's very hard. But what happens is you may be only pedaling like 20 RPM, right?
Yeah.
And so you're basically almost mimicking like a higher threshold motor unit activation every few seconds, right? So the body is forced to have to recover from that kind of higher level push within a couple of seconds of each other.
And so the philosophy behind that is that that would translate over to like high intensity just training sessions.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think sort of indirectly, I guess, it's not necessarily going to make the motor units faster or more or stronger. What it is going to do is, like I said, it's going to build more mitochondrial density. Mitochondria are kind of overlooked when it comes to strength sports because we think, oh, type 2 fibers, we don't need mitochondria.
When you think mitochondria, you think, oh, that's for aerobic people.
Right, and so and also I think that if you look at the science, everybody says like, oh, you want as much type 2X muscle fibers as possible for as much strength and power as possible. But there's a reason why type 2X muscle fibers become type 2A, right? That's not a mistake. That literally, as soon as you do any activity whatsoever, type 2X muscle fibers want to transition to type 2A. Doesn't matter what it is. And why do they want to do that? Well, because mitochondria are important no matter what you're doing. They want to have a little bit of mitochondria so that they can recover better, so that they can recover in between sets better. And, you know, better mitochondrial health is just better overall for everything that you're talking about. That's what rules basically our energy production, right? So we need ATP for everything we do.
So you're saying that, that's really interesting. So you're saying that whatever you do, whether it's super specific strength training, you have the type 2X fibers have a tendency to transition onto type 2A instead of B.
Unless all you ever do is 1 rep max and pull it as fast as you possibly can, they're going to want to go from type 2X to type 2A. If you do 5 rep maxes, they're going to want to go to type 2A. Now, they're still very, very strong and very fast and very powerful as type 2A. They just have
capacity.
They have 1 or 2 extra mitochondria that are allowing them to, like I said, do all the stuff they need to do as far as recovery is concerned. So that's how it kind of indirectly for me gets them to be stronger. Because if you can recover more from a little bit higher volume or a little bit higher intensity and be able to hit, by the time you go back to hitting that high intensity lift for the next session, if you're better recovered, you're going to be able to do a little bit more on that training session and then a little bit more on the next one. And then that kind of compounds a bit over time. And then we don't have to maybe deload quite as often because you're in better shape. And then, you know, that's just more time that we're building momentum.
Do you think just the athletes in general kind of undermine the importance of recovery?
Oh yeah, I think that's probably everybody wants to, everybody wants the sexy stuff. Everybody wants to talk about lifting heavy and all the training modalities that are out there in terms of whether it's DUP or whether it's, you know, conjugate method or whether it's every other iteration that we could think of. But people don't understand that, okay, for powerlifting, maybe it takes them 2 hours to get their training session done, right? 1 to 2 hours of your day, how much of that, you know, that's a very relatively small percentage of your day. It's really the other 22 hours of the day that matter, right?
Yeah.
What are you doing the other 22 hours in order to make sure that you're able to keep working out at the intensity you want to work out at? And if you're not doing the right things in terms of recovery, in terms of nourishment, in terms of sleep, in terms of you know, taking care of stressors outside of the gym, because we all know that, you know, the gym is a stress. It's positive stress, but it's still stress. If you're living like a crazy hectic lifestyle and your job's, you know, beating you into the ground and, you know, you're not sleeping well, you know, eventually training's just gonna, your
suck.
body,
Yeah, it's just gonna suck.
your body has an interesting way of forcing you to stop and rest. Whether that is, oh, I'm gonna get sick, or well, there's some back pain for you.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing I like to tell people about pain science. One thing that I've sort of realized is that a lot of times you get pain and there's no like actual, you can take an MRI and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
But they have pain. Why is that? Well,
because their chakra is off.
Their chakra's off. They haven't done their frequency, high frequency. They haven't done their detox tea that day. But in all seriousness, the brain or the nervous system, the brain will say, has a few ways of telling you to chill out.
Yeah.
It's going to either start giving you signs like, oh, I'm feeling tired, and it's going to tell you, it's going to make you feel kind of like unmotivated, which is how people start to feel like heading into like when they need a deload week. They're feeling like, I don't really want to go to the gym and stuff like that. And if you ignore that and you say, nah, whatever, I'm just going to be, I'm going to be a man about this and just go crush this weight. Well, then guess what?
The weight crushes you.
Guess what your brain's going to do? Okay, this guy's not listening to me. What's the only way I can get him to literally stop what he's doing? I'm going to make it hurt.
Yeah.
If it hurts, he's not going to do it.
Yeah.
Or she. Yeah. So that's why sometimes people get this pain, chronic low back pain or chronic shoulder pain, where no matter what they do, it just is always there, keeps coming back. They get an MRI, it's nothing there. Maybe they get the surgery, still hurts, right? Because they're not actually taking care of what's actually the problem, right?
That's an interesting point in talking about pain, is that we think usually of pain as something that kind of works against us, whereas what you're saying almost is that it works for us, and it's almost
working for you.
Exactly, it's a signal. Like if I put my hand over a burning flame, my body's going to tell me, "Hey, put your hand away because of the pain." If we didn't have that pain signal, I would just keep it there until my hand, has a hole in it from the fire.
Sure.
So that's interesting.
Then you're being aware.
Now. Of course, I'm not saying like if you broke your ankle, that's not your brain that's telling you you need to take a break.
Up, dude.
Yeah, if there's something really there, there's something there. But I see a lot of cases of people who don't have a soft tissue injury, or they don't have a herniation, or they don't have a meniscus tear or anything like that, but their knee hurts, or their back hurts, or their hip hurts, and you have to dive deeper sometimes on that kind of stuff.
So for people that do kind of fit that profile of they have a busy life, maybe they have like a executive position or something at their job, or they're just super busy with their work or other things, how do you kind of work around those kind of things to make sure that they're still making progress?
So the first thing I always like to do with people, and this is something that I think not a lot of people do regardless of whether they want to work out or whatever, is a lot of people don't really know what their values are, and they don't really know what their priorities are in life. A lot of people think of their priorities as what they think is the most important thing in their life, right? So this is why sometimes it becomes a little shocking for people who have like kids, because to them, their kids are the most important thing in their life. So that means that their highest priority is their kids. But then you start to ask them about their day. What do you spend most of your time doing throughout the day? And for a lot of people, that's work, or other things start to, pile on, and they start to realize that, they're choosing other things over maybe spending more time with their kids, not because they're bad parents and not because they don't love their kids, but because in their mind, they've prioritized work because that's how they take care of their kids, right? Or they've prioritized other things in their life because, for whatever reason or another. So the only way I can be successful as a coach is if I know what's important, what is a priority for my client. So that way I know how to structure their day or structure their training around those things, or to help make it fit within their training better. And what I mean by that is if I'm working with say a businessman who wants to be better at his job, and then he wants to also train hard, I'm going to tell him, okay, you only have so much time in the day, right? So obviously we want you to work out. And we want that workout to actually make you better at your job. We want to make you a better businessman with your training, not the other way around. Right? We don't want your training to take away from your priorities. And so sometimes it's an honest conversation about like, hey, I know that you see like these Instagram guys who are killing it with super heavy weights and they're back squatting and they're doing all this, awesome stuff, but that's kind of like their job, right? That, that their job is to be that guy.
Yeah.
Your job isn't. Your job is to be Mr. Businessman and then also work out on top of that. And if you want to do a competition and stuff, I'm all for it. But let's have an honest conversation about how you're not going to be, setting world records, right? You're going to be doing better for yourself, and you're going to be setting PRs within your own domain. But, and that might translate to a silver medal or something like that at a local meet. But that you got to be okay with the fact that that's your like the level of achievement that you're going to get, right? And then there's the opposite spectrum where I work with people who their job is to lift, and so we have to work around other things in life, like if they got kids and they've got stuff to do, podcasts or different businesses that they're running, and YouTube videos to do. We got to find a way to prioritize training a little bit, and so that way everything fits, and that way we don't start running into problems where they're overstressed and they're overextending themselves. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no,
Do you
100%.
feel like people are really receptive to that when you have that conversation? Where if you want to be a great businessman and you want to train, you have to accept the fact that you're not going to be a world record holder, or you're not always going to place top 3.
I think that's probably
a hard pill to swallow for some people.
I mean, that's the hard part of my job, I guess, is that sometimes I have to be the bad guy, and I have to tell people, be frank with them about what is realistically achievable.
Have you ever had somebody tell you like, well, fuck, if you're not gonna, if you can't guarantee me that I'm gonna place top in my meet, then I'll go find somebody else.
Sure, yeah. And if that's, I always tell people, listen, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm gonna tell you my opinion. And I'm not saying that my opinion is even the right one. I'm just giving you what I think, what I'm assessing from you. And, sometimes they don't like what I have to say. And they say, well, I'm going to go find somebody who's going to give me what I want. And that's fine. I have no problem with that. If they, and I actually hope that they succeed and prove me wrong, right? I hope that if they go with somebody else, I still hope they have success. I don't wish ill on them just because they didn't hire me or whatever. But
the ill will come to them.
Yeah. So I hope if I'm wrong, then I learned something. Why was I wrong? Let me go back to what I assessed and where was I. Maybe I overlooked the fact that they're like a Kobe Bryant type of person, and they're just going to, no matter what. Tore an Achilles tendon, I'm still going to hit these free throws and then walk off the court, right? Maybe I didn't catch that part of them. Sometimes there's people like that.
So I want to change gears now.
Yeah.
You definitely answered my question. Thank you.
Sure.
Change gears a little bit and throw kind of a curveball in here. So you talked a little earlier about you, for the high intensity continuous training and all those things, you use things like the prowler and the sled rags and all those things. Do you incorporate kind of strongman-esque elements sometimes into either your own or your clients' training? Because I feel like sometimes as powerlifters, bodybuilders, we overlook that whole sport. But I personally think that there's a lot of kind of untapped potential that those athletes could benefit from that sport.
Yeah, I like strongman a lot because if you think about it, those guys are having, it's kind of what I'm talking about. They kind of live what I am talking about, which is they are very strong and they're able to produce that strength repeatedly with not a lot of rest in between a lot of times, right? If they're doing, all their strongman training, they don't necessarily have a lot of rest compared to like powerlifters who might hit a set at, a triple and then they rest like 6-7 minutes and then they hit it again, right? Strongmen don't really do that. They're having to produce strength in an aerobic way, if that makes sense. The same way that a CrossFitter would have to produce strength during their WOD or their Metcon in an aerobic fashion, right? So you see like Matt Frazier, who is putting up these numbers that are basically my 1 rep max. on like a clean and jerk or whatever.
After a 1 mile run.
Yeah, after
Yeah.
a 1 mile run.
50-pound
and
pack.
then they get done with that, and then they do 50 chest to bar pull-ups, and then they get done with that, and then they do 50 handstand push-ups, and then they do it all again for time, right, over and over. And if you look at the guy, you're like, wow, he's not really like trying that hard to do those things. By the end, his breathing is hard and he's working, but that's an aerobic weight for him. Same way that a strongman picks up these Atlas stones, or they're doing all the crazy stuff that they do. They're producing strength in an aerobic way, and that's where I'm going back to like the mitochondria thing, is having that hybrid ability to produce the strength when you need it, but also recover from that. That it's like a Ferrari, right? You can pedal to the metal that thing down the track, but chances are, if you keep doing that over and over again, the Ferrari is going to break if you don't give it some time to rest, right? As opposed to having something that's a little more efficient, maybe like a Porsche or something like that. It's not as strong, it's not as fast as a Ferrari. It's still pretty fast, but it's able to kind of take that beating a little bit more over and over and over again. So to answer your question, yes, I think that I've kind of started doing more of like strongman style things in terms of like prescribing specific rest periods for people when they're doing like a cluster set of an exercise, or doing farmers carries, or doing things like that to build that aerobic strength, right? If that makes sense. Yeah. I think that that is a really good training style, especially for the off season for a lot of strength athletes.
Yeah, I think you brought up some really good points there where I think people miss the importance of being able to repeatedly express right your strength, and that's the goal. Whether, especially if you're a powerlifter, you want to be able to repeatedly express your strength through multiple meets. You don't want to be the Ferrari where you go down one road and you're going 100 miles an hour, and then you're
maybe
broken
Ferrari's
afterwards.
the wrong one, like a Veyron, a Bugatti Veyron. That thing is really good at going super fast, but chances are, like, you don't want to keep doing that over and over.
And then you break, and then you take
there's
like a year or two.
There's a time and place for being able to be the Veyron, right? That's on the platform. That's when it counts. That we need that one all-out effort. We need to be able to go deep into our nervous system and tap into everything we've got for this lift. But you're going to have to do that 2 more times throughout the competition, right?
Plus your other 6 lifts.
Yeah. Well, so I'm saying, like, let's say your first and second attempt were easy on squat, and then you're just going for it on your third attempt. Cool, you got a PR. We're doing great. Guess what? We still got to do it for bench, and then we got to do it for deadlift. So how are you going to navigate that? Being able to do it again. And I think a lot of people overlook that.
It's funny, we were having this conversation about one of my athletes on the way here, where he thinks that every single time he's on a platform, he's got to hit a PR for every single
You know lift. Who you are.
Yeah, that's not necessarily true.
And I was telling him that in that would be in an ideal world, but in the real world, if you PR 1 or 2 lifts, that's a really good day.
Sure,
that's a really good day. And then if you wanna be able to perform well in all 3 lifts, you have to kind of strategically navigate yourself around your attempt selection, right? If you want to do well on your deadlift, can you afford to go a 10.5 RPE on your third attempt squat and bench?
Sure.
No,
not necessarily.
You can't.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think once you get past like your first meet, you get an idea of what a meet is like and what it should be. Hopefully your first meet went well, so that way you want to keep coming back. You didn't bomb out. But
some bomb outs.
Going forward, you start to realize that this is a sport just like anything else. And if your goal is to, hit a squat PR, by all means, go out and go ham on the squat. If your goal is to have a total PR, that's a whole different way of navigating things, right? And if your goal is to win a competition that you know is going to be tight between you and a few other people, well, then it comes down to attempt selection. Yeah. Because if you miss an attempt, that means that the difference between possibly not even getting a medal or getting first place, right? Yeah. Especially at like nationals.
Yeah. And I feel like that's reflected in other sports too, right?
Look at weightlifting.
Weightlifting, and the first thing that popped in my head is like fourth quarter of a basketball game, right? If we're trailing and I have my best player, I'm not gonna have him go balls to the wall
Right.
for the whole 12 minutes. I'm going to give him some rest, maybe 6 minutes, and then put him in the last 6 minutes because that's when I need him to perform.
Yeah,
that's
so
going to make the difference between winning and losing the game.
Imagine if, what's the coach now, Luke Walton? So imagine if Luke Walton told LeBron James, hey, let's go out quarter one. I want you to score 30 points this quarter. I don't want to see you take 1 second of
I want a
rest.
triple-double first quarter, man.
Well, he could probably do that. Just LeBron James. But by the fourth quarter, he's not going to even be able to play, right? And then they're going to lose the game because LeBron's not out there.
Yeah.
So LeBron's smart. You always see good players always turn it on when it needs to be turned on. And for the rest of the game, they are conserving what they've got in order to make it to where it counts. Yeah, so same analogy for powerlifting.
Let's transition over to some bodybuilding.
Sure.
I think we covered powerlifting.
Yeah.
So with your bodybuilding athletes, how do you manage? Because, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like bodybuilders have a whole bunch of different pieces that they need to kind of hone in on.
Mm-hmm.
How do you kind of balance that? Do you have like specific focuses at certain times, or
As far as like, give me an example, like.
So, like, okay, so I guess what I'm just saying is like there's so many different like muscle groups that someone needs to work on,
posing and like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So how do you place a priority or focus on one or two things?
So,
as opposed to everything else?
so usually what happens with people who are bodybuilding is they have one or two body parts that are a strength for them. So, whatever it's their arms or their back, or some people it's even their legs and they have a smaller upper body. First thing I do is assess where they're at with that kind of stuff. What are their weak parts? What are their strong parts? And then what are the things in the middle in terms of like their, physique? And when it comes to training that, if they need obviously if they need their legs to come up, I'm going to put their upper body on more of like a maintenance volume or a maintenance, type of training. And then I'm going to push as much of the stimulus towards the legs as possible. I think a lot of times bodybuilders have the tendency to just hit everything balls to the wall, and I have to have a conversation with them of, okay, you've been doing that now for how many years, right? You've been going ham on every single body part for how many years? 5 years, something like that. And it's done really well for the body parts that are strength for you, but what has it done for your weak parts? Nothing. No matter how much intensity you hit them with, they're not growing. So what does that tell me? That tells me that by the time they're training, say their legs, because those are their weak part, they're not actually able to put as much into it because they're putting so much into everything else. Mm-hmm. So everything's just like a game of, you only have so many assets, so many chips to put on each thing. And so we want to take some chips from the things that are already good, put them onto the, double down on the things that are bad. And then just kind of make sure the others are covered in the meantime. So in terms of like building people up that way, that's what I do. I think with bodybuilders, it's tough. It depends on where they're coming from, like nutrition wise. They could be very much into health and like clean eating and stuff like that. Or maybe they're coming from IFYM, and we talked last time about how that can get dangerous with food selection and stuff. So I have to manage that for a lot of them. One thing that I see a lot in bodybuilders, for whatever reason, especially females, is they're scared of fat intake. They don't eat a lot of fat. And that's one of the worst things you can do.
That's still like a concern?
Still, yeah. Whatever the dogma is around it, or the stigma, around fat. It's unfortunate that we call people who are overweight fat, because it's caused
so much confusion.
It's caused a dark cloud around that macronutrient.
Need a new word.
And here's the other thing that I realized, especially with physique athletes, is that their fat becomes low also because they start to rely on all of those foods that are like super filling. So like, lots of like, salads and stuff with the Walden Farms dressing, which is low in fat. And then they try to get like the 96% ground beef because they can have more of it and not spend so much of their macros. Yeah. And that way they can feel fuller for longer. And so a lot of those kinds of those filling foods end up being lower in fat. And then it kind of like feeds into that whole like low-fat approach.
Talk about why that's an issue.
That's an issue because our fats are how we support our hormones, right?
Yeah.
And they're, I mean, not even just hormones, but everything as it comes to like our, cell membranes and our brain health and our, the myelin sheaths around our nerves and everything is
libido.
Yeah, which goes back to the hormones. And so a lot of times I'll see females come to me, not even just bodybuilders, to be honest, general population people who are struggling with some sort of issue with their menstrual cycle, or they're struggling with some sort of issue with having high estrogen compared to progesterone, like a PCOS or something like that. And I look at their diet, and sometimes they're on like 30 grams of fat.
Wow.
So what's that telling me? Is that their body is trying so hard to produce estrogen. Now it's not just relying on production of estrogen in the reproductive system. It's now looking at estrogen production in the adrenals, and we can actually produce estrogen in other tissues like the breast tissue, and like pretty much most tissues in the body can do it. Just like the brain can produce insulin, right? So I don't know if you knew that, but
fun fact.
So that's telling me that the body is just so tapped out in its ability to produce the right hormones that it's relying somewhere else. And if you start relying on estrogen production in the adrenals, what's going to happen is progesterone is going to go down, because it's going to start converting all of the resources that are going normally to progesterone into estrogen. And now we have an imbalance. Estrogen is fine. Progesterone's in the tank, right? And that's just a cascade of problems. So the thyroid, then their metabolism slows down. Then they have to cut back even more calories because they're gaining weight on because their metabolism's slowing down. And then what's the first one to go is fat, because that's the most calorie dense macronutrient. And now we're just snowballing even more into the same problem. Yeah. And so it's hard because psychologically, I'm telling them, hey, we're going to have to reverse you and finagle this in a way where we get your fat intake up. Automatically, they think they're going to get fat. And I have to tell them, chances are you probably are going to gain a little bit of weight. Because
that's the reality of it. Yeah.
And they're so focused on, I got to stay lean. I got to stay within so many weeks out of my competition. That they're missing the forest for the trees. Yeah. They're so focused on their sport that they're missing the fact that they're a human being and they need to live for 60 more years, right?
That you're a human being first before an athlete.
Yeah, health before like your athletic endeavors. So that's a big thing that I have to. So a lot of times with bodybuilders, it's like a psychological game I have to play with them.
So the programming and the training is the easy part, is what you're saying.
Yeah, if you notice a theme with like everything I've been talking about today and in the last podcast is, for me, specifying sets and reps and exercises and specifying macros, that's walk in the park. That's a piece of cake.
I just saw on your Instagram you made a post about what is it? Coaching is more than writing programs.
Yep. Yeah, that's the main takeaway. If I have any impact on the industry at all, it's that I hope that in 20 years or even 10 years that coaches do more than just give people a training plan. I think and I think it's important for the legitimacy of the profession that I've chosen. People look at the doctor and the physical therapist and the nutritionist, like a registered dietitian, as pillars of expertise, and they trust them and they seek their knowledge. And I want for people who become a coach and the leaders in the coaching profession to be that as well, to be a pillar of information and expertise that people trust, because they have the expertise in many different areas of health, physiology, if they're nutrition, biochemistry, all of that stuff, so that, not necessarily that they're not going to be an expert at everything, but they're going to know enough to be able to make the right decision for their athlete or for their client.
Not to go off too much on a tangent, but I agree with that. I think that this field of coaching, and not even just for athletes, but for general population, has a potential to kind of be shown in the same light as what you're saying, like a doctor, dietitian, all those things, as like a healthcare provider. Because I think right now it's not really seen as that. It's more so just for people that want to train and, you know, want to look good. But there's a lot of potential for that. And I think it would, to your point, if we do begin to focus on other metrics of health, I think you start to begin looking that way. So I think what you're going for is the right approach.
Yeah, you know, I try to approach it that way. You know, like for anybody that's listening, if you were to come to me today and sign up, the way I intake people is very similar to like a medical approach. Basically, I have them fill out like a bunch of information, background information about medical history, injury history, nutrition history, training history. I ask women about their menstrual cycle and how that's doing. If they have blood work that I can look at, I always love looking at blood work and seeing what's going on under the hood and making suggestions based on that. I'm not giving medical advice. I'm giving theoretical suggestions.
Right.
And after I get the intake form and I have all the information, I analyze it. And I always try to have a phone call with everybody or a Skype call because I want to talk to that person and I want to know more in depth what they told me on their sheet. I want to know a little bit more in depth on a few things most of the time. And I want to hear them actually tell me so I can hear their voice when they talk about some of the things that they're talking to me about.
That's a good point.
Because what they put on paper sometimes is a lot far removed. What you glean from paper is a lot far removed from what you might hear on a phone call or hear in their voice. I assess everything because I don't want to be the guy that just, you know, throws the same training plan to everybody and the same, you know, I don't want to become like a person that becomes dogmatic in my own like style of programming and giving coaching advice. I want for it always to be tailored to that person. Just like a doctor is not going to be like, everybody needs to take amoxicillin for whatever they come into the doctor's office. Imagine that. Imagine if you went to the doctor and you broke your leg and he's like, amoxicillin, you're good to go.
I have a viral infection, but amoxicillin.
And then the next guy comes in and he's got strep throat. Maybe the amoxicillin would help. And then the next lady comes in and she's got a lump on her breast. Amoxicillin, we're good to go. Right?
Wow.
Now that's sort of how I like to explain some of the
cookie cutters.
Yeah, the cookie cutter fitness
stuff,
industry,
right?
Instagram, DM
The broken clock is going to be right twice a day, right? That coach is going to be right for enough people to be able to throw his testimonials onto Instagram because he hit enough times.
Yeah.
But you don't see the other people that he screwed up.
The turnover.
Right, the turnover, the people that didn't have success.
Could you imagine if coaches had put up their turnover rate on like Instagram?
It would be terrible.
There'd be a lot of people out of business really fast, right? And the problem with that is that, you know, somebody like me even, I've had to struggle really hard over the last year and a half to try to build up a legitimacy on social media or on my website or try to get people to kind of take notice of how I do things because it's not the sexy way. It's the unsexy way. It's the way that I think is gonna work, but other people want to rely on the quick fix and the 6-pack abs shredding program. But yeah, that's kind of the way I approach things. Yeah.
I think if we learn anything from people before us and yourself and everything, that there is a niche group of people that are willing to take that less sexy approach.
Yeah, and I think it's growing. I think a lot of people, especially with the way healthcare is going in this country now, that want to take their health into their own hands.
Yeah.
Right. So like Arizona is one of the states in the United States that allows you to go to a third party lab and get blood work done without a doctor's prescription. So you know, people are starting to want that kind of thing. They want to be in control of their own health. They want to know when they go to the doctor, how much is this going to cost me, right? What are my options in terms of like, do I need to go with this doctor or can I shop around? And, you know, I get a lot of clients who shop around for coaches. They come to me and they say, hey, you know, I'm considering other people. And, you know, I'm lucky enough that they choose me, for whatever reason that they like in my style or my approach, or maybe, I believe a lot in like the consultation, that it really helps people like get to know me better too. But I think, as that trend grows, that people want to take their health into their own hands and they really want to have true health care, not just sick care, that's where the coaching profession can really step in and be what it should be, basically, which is helping people to be healthy.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think it's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
The people realize that, again, like your style of coaching, there's a lot more of the human component there.
Yeah.
Where you provide a consultation, you ask all of these questions, you get to know the individual in such a core basis, like who they are as a person and how they function outside of what they do in the gym.
Yeah, I think it swung that way. Coaching didn't used to be online. You used to have to go to the gym and have a coach. Personal trainer. And so it's much easier to do this kind of stuff in person, right? Talking to people, and you get to see them more often. And I have to rely on my clients to check in with me and leave me notes on their program and send me emails and text messages to let me know how they're doing. And the most successful ones that I've had do that. Yeah. They let me know what's going on. They and I think because coaching went online, it always swings, right? It went from I'm in person, I'm seeing this person every day, I'm on top of all of their stuff, to I could do this online. I don't have to talk to anybody. I just give them a program, and then I never have to talk to these people, and I get as many clients as I need to pay the bills. And I think it's swinging more back to the middle, which is where everything always settles. Where this is online, but if I'm really going to have success here, and my clients are going to have success, we need to have that personable thing. We need to have that connection.
Cool. Well, I think this is a good time to wrap up.
Okay.
So you have a seminar coming up.
I have a seminar coming up. Yeah.
Talk about that.
It's the day after Mr. Olympia. What day would that be? I should remember this. It's the 19th.
September.
Yeah, the 19th, I believe, of September. It's a seminar with Dr. Lane Norton, BioLane, his partner and business partner and girlfriend, Holly Baxter, and also Paul Ravella, who is somebody that's worked with Lane for a long time as well. They're good friends, and he has his own company, Pro Physique, and myself. I'm lucky enough to have been invited to talk with them.
September 16th.
September 16th. Yeah. Sorry about that. So September 16th, it's a Sunday. It's going to be a 6-hour seminar. Right now we have early bird sales. First 30 people that sign up, $99. Everybody after that, after the early birds have sold out, it's $149. But it's going to be a lot of good information. You guys are probably familiar with Lane and his work. And
who's that?
Holly is incredibly smart, and Paul as well. Obviously, they've all coached various people in the industry and have had great success. And I'm honored to be able to speak with them. They're going to be covering more nutrition aspects, and Paul's going to be covering more of like coaching and contest prep, and I'm going to be covering more strength training and sort of kind of the same kind of things we've been talking about during this podcast, but more in depth.
Is it going to be like a hands-on portion of the seminar too?
As of right now, we don't have enough time to do both practical and the seminar. So for now, it's just going to be lectures and seminar with questions and answers and all that kind of stuff. But still, I think it'll be a great time for anybody that's interested to come out and learn. Say hi to me if you're following me on Instagram or want to say hi. I always like talking to people. So check that out. You can go to biolane.com and check out the seminars information and sign up if you're interested.
Is there anything else you want to plug?
Are you guys going to be at the... do you have a booth at the Olympia?
I don't know. Actually, that's a good question. I have to ask Lane about something. I don't have a booth. I don't have a booth.
The BioLane booth.
Strength Cave.
Yeah, the BioLane booth. I'll have to get some like T-shirts printed up and some stuff like that.
There you go.
Actually, I am going to be starting to sell T-shirts with my logo and a couple of funny things on the back.
There you go.
Okay, there we go.
So look out for that on my website.
What's your website?
www.thestrengthcave.com.
Which is also his social media for everything, right?
Yeah, so at the Strength Cave on Instagram.
The Strength Cave.
The Strength Cave. You can also catch me on Lane's YouTube for now. I'm going to be starting my own YouTube here in a little bit. And appreciate you guys.
And his own podcast.
Yeah, maybe my own podcast. I appreciate the both of you for having me on for a second time.
Absolutely.
I guess they liked me so much they brought me back. I don't know why they liked me so much, but I'm glad to be back. And
it's because he just didn't give us just a program.
Yeah, I didn't. I had the personable connection.
Exactly.
But these two are awesome. You guys should listen to them more. You should go to their Instagram. You should see this guy is going to be competing here, I think, in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Right?
It's still a big maybe just because of the weight class consideration.
Okay.
He can't be Joey Flex. Is what he said when we were talking about it.
And I got at the moment I have 3, potentially 4 people I'm handling, and it's tough. Like handling one person is stressful enough. And as much as I want to compete alongside my guys and my girls, I'm a coach first, so they have to come first.
Sure.
And I really doubt I can handle the stress of handling myself and then 4 other people all at once. So
at the very least, you probably see him do like a test day. Like
I'll probably do a test day
mock
for
meet.
And
then
he's posting on his social media. Where can they find you?
At agent _ J Schroth. That's JSCHROTH.
There you go. The Strength Cave. You can find me at Mikey Ernesto _ the Agora. The podcast, blog posts, everything else can be found on agora10.com, AGORATEN.com. Andres, thank you so much for being here once again. Everybody else, we will see you guys next time.
Maybe not. If you guys are enjoying the content that we're providing, please leave us a rating on iTunes and whatever platform that you're consuming the podcast on. Give us a rating there because it really helps the content spread out to more people, because it obviously pushes up the leaderboard. So please give us a rating, 5-star rating, and leave us a comment. Tell us how you like it.
Even if you didn't like it, 5-star rating.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't like it, exactly. Thank you guys so much.